In the quiet, close-knit town of Hartford, Wisconsin, neighbors knew each other, and violent crime was something you only saw on the news. By many accounts, the town had been a haven from that kind of brutality for decades. But in the summer of 2013, that long-held peace was about to be shattered. A 19-year-old musician, a true light in her community, was found murdered in her own bed. The investigation that followed would not only expose the darkness hiding behind a familiar face, but would also unravel a second, chillingly similar attack, revealing a predator who had been hunting in their midst, hiding in plain sight. It was the morning of July 15th, 2013. Jessie Blodgett's mother, Joy, got home around noon. Jessie, a talented musician, had been out late the night before at a cast party for Fiddler on the Roof, a local production she'd starred in. Seeing her daughter's car in the driveway, Joy just figured the 19-year-old was sleeping in. She went to Jessie's room and called her name. No response. She gently shook her daughter's shoulder, but Jessie didn't move. A horrifying realization began to set in. Panicked, Joy called 911, her voice trembling as the dispatcher tried to walk her through CPR. But it was too late. When paramedics and police arrived, they walked into a scene of unimaginable horror. Jessie Blodgett was gone, and it was clear she hadn't died peacefully. To really get the weight of this tragedy, you have to understand who Jessie Blodgett was. Born in 1994, Jessie was one of Hartford's brightest stars. From a young age, music wasn't just a hobby for her. It was her language, her entire world. She was an accomplished violinist, pianist, and singer who didn't just play music, she radiated it. Her talent was undeniable, captivating everyone who had the chance to hear her perform. She was studying music education at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, dreaming of sharing her gift with others. And she was already living that dream, teaching piano, violin, and voice lessons to kids in her community. Jessie was a fixture in the local arts scene and a regular in community theatre, where she was magnetic on stage. The very weekend she died, she had just wrapped up a run as the fiddler in Fiddler on the Roof, earning praise from everyone who saw it. She was vibrant, full of life, and on the edge of a future that seemed limitless. Her father, Buck Blodgett, described her as a force for good, someone who drew people in with her warmth. She was deeply loved by her family, friends, and students. Her journal entries revealed a young woman who was not only talented, but also deeply compassionate, already thinking about how to make a positive impact on the world. In a cruel twist of fate, just before she was killed, she had taken a keen interest in tackling male-on-female violence, a cause that would soon define her legacy. The town of Hartford felt safe. It was the kind of place where people trusted each other, where some, like the Blodgetts, might not have even thought twice about leaving a door unlocked. No one could have imagined that this trust would be so horrifically betrayed, or that the life of someone as beloved as Jessie was about to be cut short. When police entered Jessie's bedroom that afternoon, the scene told a story of brutal violence. Jessie was in her bed, but the subtle, sinister marks on her body spoke volumes. There were ligature marks on her neck and abrasions on her wrists, clear signs of a struggle. An autopsy would later confirm the devastating truth. Jessie Blodgett had been bound, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. The most unsettling detail for investigators was the lack of any forced entry. It immediately suggested two terrifying possibilities. Either Jessie knew her attacker and let them in, or the killer was so familiar with the family that they knew they could just walk right in. The attack felt personal. Investigators estimated the murder occurred sometime that morning, hours after Jessie had returned from her party. This meant the killer likely knew her schedule, knew she would be home, and knew they could get in undetected. News of Jessie's murder sent shockwaves through Hartford. Fear gripped the community. Homicides were almost unheard of there. One investigator noted the town hadn't seen a murder in decades. Suddenly, that sense of safety was gone. Who could have done this? And why? Police began by retracing Jessie's last known movements, talking to friends, cast members, and family. Her journal mentioned a couple of men at the party who had made her uncomfortable, but investigators quickly cleared them both. The next day, as detectives worked, grieving friends held a vigil at the Blodgett home. Amid the tears, one of the mourners was a young man named Daniel Bartelt, a childhood friend and former boyfriend of Jessie's. He shared her passion for music and theatre. He stood with Jessie's parents, offering comfort, sharing hugs, and weeping with them. No one knew that the monster they were all searching for was standing right there in their living room. While Hartford police were investigating Jessie's murder, detectives in the next town over were working on a seemingly separate case. 3 days before Jessie was killed, a woman named Melissa Etzler was walking her dog in Richfield Nature Park. In a terrifying, unprovoked attack, a man tackled her from behind, holding a knife. A desperate struggle began. Melissa was a fighter. She grabbed the blade of the knife with her bare hands, refusing to be a victim. She suffered deep cuts that would later need stitches, but her bravery paid off. She managed to disarm her attacker, who, shocked and thwarted, scrambled away and fled in a blue van. Shaken but alive, Melissa gave police an incredibly detailed description of her attacker. A tall white male in his late teens or early 20s with blonde hair and glasses. Police created a composite sketch. A deputy had a nagging feeling he'd recently run the plates on a matching blue van. He looked back through his records. The van was registered to the parents of a 19-year-old named Daniel Bartelt. This was the first time Bartelt's name had come up in connection with a violent crime. He was known as a smart, talented kid. Like Jessie, he was a musician and had been active in theatre at their high school where they had briefly dated. But after high school, while Jessie thrived, Daniel's life seemed to be stalling. He dropped out of college after 1 semester. His parents told him if he wasn't in school, he needed a job. Soon after, Daniel pretended he'd found one, leaving the house every morning and coming back every evening. In reality, he was unemployed, and as the investigation would later suggest, he spent his days driving around, lost in dark thoughts. On July the 16th, the day after Jessie's murder, Daniel Bartelt was at the Blodgett home for the vigil when his phone rang. It was the Richfield police. They wanted to talk to him about the attack in the park. Unaware of the real reason for the call, Jessie's parents reassured him that the police were likely just questioning all of Jessie's friends. Wiping away his fake tears, Daniel left the house full of mourners and drove right into the hands of justice. The idea that a killer could blend in so easily, fooling even those who thought they knew him best, is a chilling thought. If you want to support us in telling more important cases like this, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue our work. Now, let's get back to the investigation. When Daniel Bartelt sat down with Richfield detectives, he thought he was there about Jesse's murder. But they started asking about the assault on Melissa Etzler. Bartelt's composure started to crack. He offered flimsy alibis. Asked about the cuts on his hands, he claimed he'd hurt himself cooking. The detectives didn't buy it. Then, Bartelt made a fatal slip. While being questioned, and before any official autopsy details had been released, he casually mentioned that his friend Jesse Blodgett had been raped and murdered. That set off alarm bells. The sexual assault was a detail known only to law enforcement and the Blodgett family. How could Daniel know? In that moment, he became the prime suspect in 2 violent crimes. Under pressure, he eventually confessed to attacking Melissa Etzler, but tried to downplay it, claiming he only wanted to scare her. This confession was all police needed. They looked back at Bartelt's movements on the day Jesse was killed. He'd told them he'd stopped at a park in Hartford. He was even seen on surveillance footage near the park's trash cans. Investigators raced over, hoping the bins hadn't been emptied. They hadn't. Inside a cereal box, they found a horrifying kit: ropes, bloody wipes, and a roll of duct tape. Forensic analysis later confirmed their worst fears. According to trial testimony, the ropes matched the ligature marks on Jesse's neck. A search of Bartelt's home turned up more of the same distinctive tape. Then, a week after the murder, investigators found a piece of that same tape under Jesse's bed. Daniel Bartelt's fingerprints were on it. The evidence was overwhelming. Bartelt's DNA was found under Jesse's fingernails, a sign of her final desperate fight. His DNA was also found on samples confirming the sexual assault. His laptop revealed a disturbing search history full of serial killers and violent pornography, including, as was reported during the trial, videos depicting strangulation. The scene he created in Jesse's room seemed to be a chilling mirror of the fantasies he'd been consuming. The mask was off. Daniel Bartelt wasn't just a grieving friend. He was a predator who had been welcomed into the home of the family he destroyed. In August 2014, Daniel Bartelt stood trial. The jury saw the mountain of evidence: the DNA, the fingerprints, the internet searches, and his damning slip of the tongue. The prosecution painted a picture of a young man who, unable to cope with his own failures, chose to inflict his rage on innocent women. The jury found him guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. At his sentencing, the judge called Bartelt a self-pitying, self-absorbed failure and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He received another sentence for the attack on Melissa Etzler, the survivor whose fight for her life was the key that unlocked the whole case. But for Jesse's father, Buck, a prison sentence couldn't bring his daughter back. In the face of unimaginable pain, he chose a path that stunned many. In his victim impact statement, he looked at the man who had murdered his daughter and said, "Dan, I forgive you." It wasn't about excusing the crime, but about refusing to let hate consume his own life. This profound act of grace became the foundation for Jesse's legacy. Remembering his daughter's passion for ending violence against women, Buck Blodgett founded the Love is Greater Than Hate Project. The organization works to end violence through education and awareness, promoting love and forgiveness over hate. Buck now travels to schools, conferences, and even prisons, sharing Jesse's story not as a cautionary tale, but as a catalyst for change. Jesse Blodgett's life was a song that ended far too soon. Her future was stolen by a senseless act of violence. But through the Love is Greater Than Hate project, her voice has not been silenced. Her spirit lives on in the message of hope her father shares with the world. A testament to the idea that even in the face of the darkest tragedies, love can and must be greater than hate. The murder of Jesse Blodgett is a terrifying reminder that monsters don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they have a familiar face. Daniel Bartolt's conviction brought a measure of justice, but what truly endures is the memory of Jessie, not as a victim, but as the vibrant, talented young woman she was. Her legacy continues through the vital work of her father's project, turning a personal tragedy into a mission for peace. Thank you for watching.